First, let me just give a little introduction to who I am. My name is Sean Ross. I'm a teaching stream professor at Vic. I teach literature and critical theory and Renaissance studies. But I also have a hat as the undergraduate research coordinator, which means that part of my job is to facilitate and support students at the undergraduate level at Vic, connecting with research opportunities. Just a little clarification on what that means I can do and what I can't do. What I can do is, well, actually, let's start with what I can't do. What I don't have is a sort of repository of jobs to hand out to people. What I can't say, aha, here, oh, I know, here's a position for you. Here's the thing to give you. Here's the research position I have ready to hand. What I can do is, and part of the reason for that is that I'm not an expert in every field, so I don't know exactly all of the details of every single field. So it's going to be particular to each of your positions what I can do and what I can't do. But what I do is support you. I can help you identify positions. I can help you navigate the complexities of applying for positions. I can help you craft an application, or at least have a look, give you some particular advice, help you come up with a plan for your specific goals. So those are my jobs. Basically, I'm a kind of person to bounce ideas off of and to get support for if you're looking into research positions. As likely many of you know, these can be hard to get. They're often extremely competitive, and that is especially so for those of you involved in anything that might lead its way to medical school. I'm sure many of you have already felt the pressure that's involved in applying for these positions, and the frank reality is that the pandemic has increased the competitiveness of these positions because fewer and fewer of them have been available. Many of the sort of usual positions that are available in the summer have been canceled, and so on. So yeah, those are some real challenges, and I will not be able to make those challenges go away, but I can help you navigate some of those challenges with a little more aplomb and strategic responses. So let me just give you a very, very brief introduction to the things I think you should keep in mind in a general way when thinking about research, and then we'll leave most of the rest of the time for questions. And feel free to just raise your digital hand if you'd like to ask me anything along the way during the presentation, okay? So you can see my contact information there. So if you have any follow-up questions or would like to organize an appointment with me following this session, you can get in touch with me there. So the first thing to keep in mind about research is to think about what kind of opportunity you're looking for. And the way that I break down the kinds of research opportunities that are available at the University of Toronto is on a kind of sliding scale from what I think of as more structured research opportunities to more autonomous research opportunities. So more structured basically means opportunities where the kinds of research that you are going to do are more or less decided for you by somebody else. The advantage of these opportunities is that they are excellent introductions into the world of research, right? So, you know, often if you're at the beginning stages of thinking about research, you don't necessarily know what you want to do or how to do it or how to approach it. So pursuing an opportunity that has more structure is often a good way to get started. So there's a couple of advantages of these kinds of things, though. So they're a good introduction. There are often clearer application pathways. It's a little bit clearer sometimes it's a little bit clearer how you get into these positions. So probably the best example of this would be something like the Research Opportunity Program, where there's a clear application portal. It's nice to know this is the sort of clear way you get in. Often these more structured research opportunities can be for credit. And again, that's true of the Research Opportunity and the Research Excursion programs. The disadvantage of these more structured opportunities are that they often cost money. So for example, if they're a course for credit, like the ROP, they cost what it costs to take a course. They also, precisely insofar as they have more structure, they often have less freedom, right? They're not necessarily tailored to your particular interests and so on. And of course, as many of you have noticed, because there are clear application pathways, they are often extremely competitive. So for those of you who are in first year and thinking about research, you should absolutely be thinking about applying to the 299 programs. The 299 programs are nice because they are specifically limited to students entering second year. So that really is consciously designed to limit the application pool to more introductory research candidates. So that's really one of the real attractions of the ROP 299 program. Now, those programs are specific to each year. And of course, the summer ones are a little bit up in the air, some of them. Some of them will be designed to run remotely. So will they be more competitive this year than usual? Yes. Nonetheless, the 299 program is still consciously designed to be a little bit more restricted in terms of how many people can apply. Other examples on this end of the spectrum would be something like, for those of you who are in more upper year level students, something like the two particular VIC capstone courses, the mentorship capstone course and the community engaged research course. These are both more structured. They provide a kind of opportunity for the mentorship courses is a little bit different in that it involves you working with first year classes, and so it's not exactly the same kind of research that you might do in a lab or something. And the community engaged research, the particular research programs change from year to year. But again, those are more structured programs that kind of push you to do something that's kind of being figured out by faculty. On the other end of the spectrum, you have more autonomy, more autonomous research opportunities. So these ones basically are ways in which you can develop a project of your own. And the big advantage of these ones is that, as you would guess, they give you more control and freedom. They allow you to develop your own ideas. They allow you to pursue something that isn't necessarily there in the curriculum or in the courses or in a lab somewhere existing. They also often have more money available for them. So there can be actually fairly sizable chunks of money for these kinds of projects. The disadvantage of this kind of research opportunity is that they're often not for credit, so they're sort of outside of your meeting your schooling demands. That may not be such a big deal for some. They usually are somewhat relationship dependent. Almost all of them depend on you having a supervisor who is willing to support you in some way. To a greater or lesser extent, depending on the opportunity, but it does depend on you having some kind of, shall we say, human capital, right? Some sense of some faculty member who's already on your team and willing to support you. And then, of course, they require more work and expertise. So it's often very challenging to try and put together a research project on your own, say at the end of your first year, simply because you don't know exactly what you want to study or you don't know exactly what you want to do. So yeah, they require a little bit more expertise. Sometimes it's hard to do this unless you've had a couple of years in your field to sort of develop some interests and research goals. And they're actually more work to put together. To write the application for the funding and so on is challenging and often requires some grant writing experience, or some support in writing grants, which is something I can do. So examples of things on this end of the spectrum would be something like the Undergraduate Research Fund, which is a sort of chunk of money from the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which can go towards basically anything that you can imagine. The Milne Research Award, which is VIC specific, the Laidlaw Scholars Program, which is if you're interested in more autonomous research and you're coming out of first or just finishing up second year, the Laidlaw Scholars is a wonderful program because it involves 2 summers of funding for research. Again, though, it does require a supervisor willing to sign off on the program. Or if you're doing some kind of research project like this, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention the Northrop Frye Undergraduate Award for people in the humanities, and for both people in the sciences and in the humanities or social sciences. One of the things that can support this kind of research project are the Vic Capstone Research Colloquia. So I teach one of those, and Professor Emmanuel Estrate teaches the other one, and these are courses designed to support people who are doing independent studies, research projects, anything along those lines, but give them a kind of framework or structure for doing those things successfully. And then, of course, you have sort of positions in the middle that are maybe highly structured, but are funded. So, for example, work study might be something like that. Most work study positions are fairly tightly structured. Or similarly, the Scholars in Residence program, which is again focused on people in the social sciences and the humanities, where you have a month-long intensive research project with 4 other students, but it's funded. You get $1,000 for the month. So you can see this kind of range, or you have something like the Vic Independent Study, which is fairly autonomous. You can kind of construct an independent study with a fair amount of liberty, as long as you have the support of a supervisor, but it's obviously costs what a course costs. So those are the kind of range of research opportunities. So one of the things to think about is, where do you feel you want to sit on this spectrum? Do you want to pursue research opportunities that have more autonomy, that give you a lot more freedom to pursue your own particular goals? Or are you looking for something that's going to give you an introduction, that's going to give you structure, that's going to give you some kind of taste of research, but that's not going to leave you swimming in the deep end, that's going to give you some steps into that process or that experience. Okay. The other thing to think about when you're pursuing research is, what are my goals? What am I doing this for? And I would say that, generally speaking, I have found students to be to have not thought about this enough. And you should be honest when you're thinking about this. Are you building your resume for a particular postgraduate goal? So, a lot of students who are thinking about medicine, for example, have a sense that they go, "Oh, I need to have research experience to get into med school." And the answer is, actually, that's not really true. At least not in the sense of having the research experience that you think of as you might have to go off the beaten path a little bit, or you might have different kinds of research experience. It might not necessarily be cancer research or something like that. I think sometimes students who feel like they need research to build their CV often have a very narrow sense of what might count. Okay? So think about, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to build my resume? If I'm trying to build my resume, are there other ways that I could do it? Am I interested in exploring or trying out a particular field? Is that my main goal? If so, then your focus should be on that particular field, right? It's no point in you pursuing a whole bunch of research opportunities that aren't going to give you that opportunity to explore a particular field. And this one, if the answer is yes to this question, then you might want to be pursuing a more something on the more autonomous end of the research opportunities. So are you pursuing a particular research project or question? Have you got excited about something? Do you really want to pursue something in particular? Did you have a question that came out of a particular class or out of a particular lab that you were working in that you want to carry further? Or is it something about working with a specific faculty member or lab or institution? So you should really take some time to kind of think about which of these goals you're trying to meet, and then prioritize your strategy for applying to research positions along those goals. I think I often speak to a lot of students who have a sort of amorphous sense that they need to have research, but they're not exactly sure why they want to do research, or what their goals are with that research, or where their interests lie. So if you have this kind of vague sense that research is important, but you don't really know why, some reflection is necessary, I think. You need to identify what those goals are, and then be honest about what you're trying to do. I would generally say that if your main goal is to build your resume, that you need to change your attitudes. Because generally speaking, the research comes out of exciting research, and research opportunities comes out of enthusiasm and interest. And enthusiasm and interest doesn't occur unless you have cultivated those interests, right? So how do you go forward? Well, one of the things that's important about making room for research in your undergraduate career is building connections. And what I have also noticed is that students tend to suddenly decide one day that they want to have a research position. And so then they think, okay, the next thing I need to do is send out 1 million emails to professors. And then they're really disappointed when none of those professors get back to them. This is a cycle I see. But one of the things that I often ask those students is, have you ever gone to a professor's office hours? Have you ever contacted a professor for anything other than a research position? Have you spoken to students higher up in the program who are working in labs? Have you ever attended a talk in your faculty? Have you done reading outside of class? And often the answer is no, I didn't realize that you were supposed to do that. So here's what I would suggest as a kind of general background for thinking about working towards research positions, especially for those of you who are in first year. One, build organic relationships that aren't already aimed at trying to get a job or trying to get a position, right? So, get to know your professors. Don't just use them. Get excited about their areas of work and research. When possible, think about taking courses with research faculty or with research engaged faculty. So for example, I have a teaching stream position, but I do my own research and I do have some funded research opportunities. So even though I'm in the teaching stream, I might be the kind of person that would be worth taking a class if you were looking for research positions down the line. So either research faculty or teaching stream faculty who are somehow engaged in research. And how do you find out about that? Well, you have to actually do a little bit of work. You have to go look at faculty pages. You might even have to read something they've written. Oh my goodness. Engage with that side of your faculty. It helps, of course, to do well in your courses. I would say that it's not necessarily the case that I've only, in my own case, I have hired students for research positions who don't necessarily have spectacular all-around marks. But I have usually hired students who have done well in one of my courses. So, if you are particularly interested in working with a particular faculty member, it doesn't hurt to really knock that course out of the park. That certainly is a help. The other thing to do is to cultivate research interests. That is, actually develop your own interests and ideas. What is it that you actually care about, that you want to pursue? This will help a lot with what I was talking about before, identifying your goals. So what does this mean? You need to read outside of class. You need to read papers in the fields that you're thinking about. You need to explore faculty projects and publications. You should attend talks in the fields that you're interested in. You should consult upper year students. But I don't know any upper year students. Well, how do you do that? You get involved in your programs, right? So you get connected through, you go to the social events or the Zoom chess night or whatever it is, that's the thing that people are gathering. And you kind of build those relationships. Research is built, research happens with the support of relationships. And then once you have a kind of, so this is sort of before you're even thinking about research, is to actually cultivate relationships in the programs that you're a part of. Generally speaking, I feel like this is the biggest missing step, is that students often in third year suddenly decide, I want to do research, but I don't have any relationships. Well, did you do anything to build those relationships? Well, not really, but can I build relationships with a bunch of faculty and peers in a week or two and then send out some emails? No, not really, right? So that said, build relationships, cultivate your interests. Why do you need to do this? Because you need to realize what you're asking for the most part when it comes to research positions, and that is not a job. Jobs, someone pays you to do something of value to them. And for the most part, that's not really what's happening when you're an undergraduate researcher. Mostly what you're asking for is a favor. Mostly what you're asking for is mentorship and training. And in some cases, there is funding available to support that kind of mentorship and training. But by and large, especially if you're early on, if you're asking for, if you're interested in doing research, mostly it's going to be more work for the faculty than they'll get out of it on a purely kind of economic way of thinking. So when you come in and work in a lab, it takes a lot of effort to train you, and there's probably a graduate student who would do it better, right? So why are they hiring you, right? Why would they take you on into this research position? And this is really important to remember. The reason is because they are people who are excited about their field. And so what is it that they want from you? They want excitement about their field, right? So this is something I think really important for you to shift your ways of thinking about approaching faculty when it comes to looking for research positions, is that you are not looking really for a job. You are looking for mentorship and training. And if you think about it in your life, who do you provide mentorship and who have you provided mentorship and training for? Right? People who have been genuinely enthusiastic about the things that you are enthusiastic about. Right? So unless you develop those genuine enthusiasms, your capacity to get research positions is going to be severely hindered. Right? So in a way, what you need to do is stop thinking about this as a kind of job application, and you have to think about this as a way to demonstrate your enthusiasm, your excitement, your willingness to learn. That's what you're appealing to in professors, right? You're appealing to the better angels of their nature. You're not appealing to how useful you're going to be, right? So when it comes to contacting professors, it makes much more sense to contact professors with whom you have some kind of relationship already, because it's hard to communicate that kind of enthusiasm through an email, or through whom or through faculty that you do have relationships with. So if you have the capacity to say, oh, I'd be really interested in doing work in this lab, but I don't know this professor, but maybe this professor, maybe I do know this professor, maybe he'd be willing to write an introduction, or maybe she'd be willing to write an introduction for me. So kind of building on the relationships you have, if possible, it's really helpful and important. And if you're in first year, the thing to do now is to lay the groundwork of those relationships. Secondly, if you do write a cold email, which may be necessary, right? You're not going to be able to network with everybody or create every opportunity. If you do write a cold email, write a new tailored email each time. Right? I've seen many students saying, what do you think about this template letter that I can write? How good is this template letter? And then I always say, don't write a template letter. What does a template letter tell? You can tell as a professor when someone's writing you a template letter, right? It says, you are a means to an end for me, right? Hello, my name is so-and-so. I am in this field. Please give me this. And then it usually ends with, please give me a job, right? But if you recognize what you're asking for, you would never write a template letter for mentorship and training, right? You're making a big ask. So just keep in mind as to what you're asking for, and if you are writing a cold email, keep that in mind. What do you want to demonstrate? You want to demonstrate your interest. You want to demonstrate your enthusiasm. You want to demonstrate your willingness to learn. What you don't want to do is lead off with here's all of the reasons I need to get into med school, and you can help me get there, right? So just kind of reframe your thinking about that. One thing you can mention is if you have any plans to apply to funding sources, right? So you could say, for example, or if you've done so successfully in the past, I have received this financial award, I have applied to, or I've got NSERC funding for this in the past, or so on. That's the kind of thing that demonstrates gumption, right? Which is something that you want to show to faculty, right? Is that you're the kind of person who, they know you don't know anything. What they want to see is that you can learn something quickly, right? And they'd be very excited to teach someone who's excited and willing to learn quickly, right? So you want to demonstrate that, and someone who's going to be a self-starter, right? Or even saying something like, you know, I'd really like to work in your lab. I'd be very interested in applying to this funding source as a way of supporting your lab. That kind of thing shows something very different than that sort of template letter that says, you know, here's me, here's my interests, here's my picture of my dog, and here's you know, why you should give me a job, right? Demonstrate what they're getting, the value that they're getting out of it, which is your enthusiasm and energy. So to be frank, those are the kind of main bits of advice I give, generally speaking, to students as they're thinking about research opportunities. And for basically all I want to do for the rest of the time is to allow you the opportunity to ask me any more specific questions and to, or any follow-up on what I've just presented.
Yeah, I just had a question about, so when is the right time? So would you say if we want a summer position, the right time is to ask in January or during winter break? Or could I ask throughout this entire second semester and I could possibly have some luck in getting something for the summer? Like, what do you think the time frame is?
It depends a little bit. There's no right answer to that. I think, again, it depends a little bit on like who you're asking. Are you talking about cold emailing people, or are you talking about people that you have relationships with already?
Yeah, like cold emailing for lab positions. Yeah, basically that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things to think about is in the fall term. I mean, I know we're not in the fall term, but in the fall term, approach contacting faculty to find out what labs they're working in, right? Or, you know, is this lab running in the summer? That kind of thing. It's often useful to begin with just kind of exploratory questions rather than the email that says, "Hey there, do you have a position for me in your lab?" And you almost can't do that too early, because it's sort of, that's the kind of thing that when it comes time in January or February to make a request, that then you're a known quantity, right? So yeah, there's no, you want to strike a balance between asking and badgering. So I would doubt that sort of there's too early. There might be too early to specifically ask for a job, but there might be, it might be good sort of right in early into the term to say like, hey, I'm really interested in your field of work. One good way to go about it is to say, especially if it's sort of earlier on, is to say like, do you know about any research opportunities in your field, whether it's in your lab or not, right? That can be a good question, because that's a little bit less like, that's more enthusiasm demonstrating and less please pay me way of asking for something, if that makes sense. So like a lot of questions like that, the answer is it depends. And the more likely you are to have some kind of relationship with the faculty, the more freedom you're going to have to contact them at any other times, because it's not going to be sort of the sense of, you know, just someone coming out of the woodwork, right? And I mean, you've all received enough emails to know how easy it is to ignore an email, right? Especially if there's lots of people writing you. So again, I would say that the vast majority of research positions come through connections first rather than cold emails. So don't sort of respond to this by saying, oh, I just have to write a much better cold email. Respond by thinking about how you could cultivate relationships. do that kind of networking. That's it. Write better cold emails, but make them specific, demonstrate kind of interest. Maybe start with a sort of, can you tell me about your field? Because if your final line is, do you have a position? Then usually the answer will be, if the answer is no, no. But if your question is, can you tell me anything about research opportunities in this field? Then they might say, okay, I don't have one, but here's an interesting lab, or here's something else, right? Then you'll get something out of the response. Yeah, is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Yeah, any other questions that people have?
My question was, what if you already built a relationship in the fall semester, let's say, but you're going up towards third year, or now it's winter, winter semester, but isn't, like, you've already had a connection with the professor. Now, as you go along the term, won't that professor like forget who you are if you come back to that professor to reach out for help?
I hope not. I don't think so. I've never forgotten a student in 2 months. But I mean, I suppose maybe if you're talking about, I can't have been that much of a relationship if you've forgotten like a month or two later. But one of the things you can do is, if that's a concern, is cultivate those relationships, right? So, you know, drop them a line in January saying, hey, I really enjoyed that course that you took, or that work that we did together. I would really be interested in connecting with you further in some way, or finding out more about the work that you're doing. You know, that's totally legitimate. And yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like a fall class or something that you've had, and you're thinking about reaching out to them now, yeah, they won't have forgotten you.
Like, there's so many people in the class, and probably I'm assuming that they all went to the office hour as well, most of them, for the assignments, and a lot of people reach out to them as well. So
a little something like, well, you know, I mean, if they ever give a talk, that's a good thing to do. Show up at the talk, ask a question. That can be helpful. You know, oh, you know, hi, professor, I was in your class and I have this really interesting question to ask you, and look at me, I'm very engaged. That can be helpful. But also, you know, if sometimes students have contacted me and said, you know, I was in this class of yours 2 years ago. Here's in my case, here's the paper that I wrote for you, or something like that. You gave me an A+. But I don't think I've ever had a student reach out to me and not remembered them.
okay.
But if you were anxious about that, just some kind of reminder, I was in this class, I got this grade, or I wrote this paper for you, or I you know, did this project, or I, you know, etc. Just something that will jog their memory is probably plenty.
But I haven't done any project, or I attended their course.
Right. Did you do well?
I did well, yeah.
They'll remember you, I bet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, you were talking about how research opportunity is not necessary for medical school application.
Right.
Yeah, I've been told that you need research, you need the experience in order to apply for medical school. You need this, and like, so I was very confused with, because I'm not particularly interested in research. One of the reasons is because I haven't got any exposure to that field. Maybe that's why. But I'm not particularly interested in one thing that I would want to expand on or have my.
Right. Well, let me put it this way. All kinds of people from all different backgrounds get into medical school with a range of different CVs. They don't all look the same. All they have in common is excellence and breadth. I've worked with students applying to med school, and certainly there are plenty of people who don't have the traditional "I worked in the lab" kind of research experience who get into med school. Often what they do have is something along the lines of some kind of maybe public health research, or they are working in with a school, finding out, like doing data analysis or something. Like the kinds of research that med school applicants do is not always what undergraduate science students think of as this counts as research, right? It might be in psychology, it might be in education, it might be in public health. So there are all kinds of pathways that are not the traditional, I did some pipetting or whatever kind of research that lead to medical school. So open your mind to those opportunities, especially if you don't feel like, oh, I'm really, I really need to do this work on zygotes or whatever it is, right? Like this, I just feel, I wake up in the morning thinking zygotes. So, if that's not where your passion lies, that's fine. But where does it? Really think about that and pursue in that regard. So yeah, do you need research for medicine? I've seen plenty of people get into medical school without what we might think of as the standard model of this is what research in the sciences look like. And I would guess, Simon, that you would back that up.
Yeah, for sure. And part of it's also like on the way to med school, you want the journey to be something that you enjoy, because if you end up doing something that you actively dislike and actively don't want to do waking up in the morning, that will also impact your trajectory in terms of going to med school and be able to write a strong, compelling statement and then be able to convince the med school that you are wanting to be a doctor because of such and such and such. Especially if you're not sort of invested in your experiences in that process, that can make it very difficult to actually convince other people that you want to be a doctor. So I think part of it's also figuring out, like, why do you want to be a doctor? And then using that as your motivation to find out what experiences you can use to help you sort of solidify that motivation to go into med school.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that when I worked helping people prepare for the multiple mini interviews preps for med school, the biggest missing piece for most people was not scientific research experience, but humanities and history training. There were more students who were unable to answer questions along the lines of, why would you respond differently to an indigenous person asking this question than a white person? Then there were people who couldn't talk about their lab experience. So if med school is your goal, I would say breadth more than sort of lab work is really what you should think about. And I would say that generally speaking, for anyone thinking about research, is that you should, whether med school is your goal or not, think about what are your goals? What do you want out of this, right? Do you just have some vague sense that you have a gap on your CV that you need to fill? Abandon that way of thinking. Think about what your interests are. Think about what you care about. Pursue your research in that way. Not only because the attitude of I've got a hole in my CV that I need to fill is not going to lead to positions, but also it's going to make your life miserable. And you don't lead a miserable life. Be happy. Pursue what you actually care about. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that, like, I just was curious about, with everything going on, there are a lot of limited opportunities. How would you say that someone in first year like myself that doesn't really have a lot of experience can stand out when contacting a professor? I mean, you said yourself that graduate students can do it better. So how would you say someone in my position can reach out and stand a chance then, if that makes sense?
Well, can you tell me a little bit more about what kind of opportunity you're specifically thinking about pursuing?
Well, a research opportunity.
Okay. Well, so again, the main thing to demonstrate is your enthusiasm and your readiness to learn, right? So how do you demonstrate your enthusiasm? Well, you think about why does this matter, right? You really need to articulate why you care about this project. That is the number one thing that faculty are going to be looking for when it comes to the ROP, right? Especially the 299, they know that you don't know anything, right? That's fine. What they're looking for is that you can understand why this would matter to them, right? As a professor, I say on behalf of all professors, we're sort of, we're fragile, egotistical people, right? What we want from students is to see why it is we wake up in the morning thinking about what it is that just drives our lives, right? Like academics are obsessive, crazy beings, right? And if they see a student who has that kind of like, oh, they get it, that's the number one thing to focus on. So if you get why they care. And then the other thing to demonstrate is your capacity to learn quickly, right? So one of the ways you can demonstrate that is show that you've done, like, I read some of the publications that you've done, or I have seen the work that's come out of this lab, right? Something that shows that you've gone above and beyond reading the ROP description and informed yourself about it. So basically that's what you want to demonstrate as much as possible, is enthusiasm and capacity to learn. You don't necessarily need to demonstrate expertise. You just need to demonstrate that you get why this matters, that connects with you. And then two, that you have the capacity to inform yourself, right? Because that's all they're going to ask you to do on the ROP is say, okay, here's this thing, I'll teach you how to do it, go do it, right? It's going to be much more along the sort of watch one, do one, teach one kind of model, right? So they just want to see that you're someone who can pick stuff up quickly, and that if you're struggling with that you're not going to be someone who goes like, please, hold my hand through the whole process, right? So just any ways that you can signal that in your application is what you're looking for. When do ROPs open up? They pretty soon. Yeah, they will open up on February 22nd. So you should, they haven't posted the projects for 2021 yet, but they should do so pretty soon because they're going to open up, initial rounds of applications will open up on February 22nd. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I'll say thank you for attending, and hopefully you found this useful. If other questions do come up, or you're looking for specific support for a particular application or something along those lines, do feel free to reach out to me via email. And best of luck in what continues to be a challenging time. Stay healthy, and hope you find exciting research opportunities.